Dylan with the Smart Economy podcast. We're at day 1 of Permissionless 3, headed towards the afternoon, and we're joined with Robinson Burkey, the co-founder of Wormhole Foundation. How are you doing today, Robinson?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit before we got recording. This is going to be a fun conversation, and I've really been jumping off all of these chats with asking people what their genesis into blockchain and crypto is. So, how did you get here? What made you decide you needed to be building here?
Yeah, I'm going to give the short story for today, but for me, it was back in 2017. I actually come from, I guess everyone has to come from a more traditional background, but mine was I was at DoorDash for a number of years, scaling new verticals there, new products. At the time in 2017, I was actually living with my roommate who started to get into mining Ethereum. Back then you mined Ethereum, proof of work. And I was like, what are you doing? You're driving up our utility costs. The classic 2017 mining utility story. Long story short, that was kind of where I was pilled, if you will, red pilled, blue pilled. Started learning more, set up my own rig. I just found it was fascinating that I could participate in this network and help decentralize it. That was the moment where I got into Ethereum, and then everything else started rolling from there. At the time I was at DoorDash, I don't know if you know, was doing very well during that time until 2021, and with COVID it did awesome. So I didn't jump, or 2020, excuse me. I didn't jump fully until around that time. So around that time I then joined Jump, where Wormhole kind of started, and then spun into Foundation.
So you were just kind of like an end user, retail user from 2017 to 2021-ish?
Oh yeah.
And what were sort of your experiences then? Were you just sticking at DoorDash because you were on the up and rising and you're I'm at a company that's going up, why would I leave? Were you looking for opportunities to get into crypto and just kept finding reasons not to?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of reasons I was at DoorDash. I mean, in general, it was a really good learning experience for me. Of course, the company was doing well, and I was passionate about it. We got to build new products that millions of people use on a daily basis. However, I would come home and do research nonstop about crypto, and there's, as you know, there's just an infinite amount of things you can learn.
Yes.
And then you have to learn how to decipher what is meaningful and what's not. That's a whole second skill you get. You're okay, what are real builders building? And then, there's a lot of noise, and finding the signal in the noise, it takes time. You have to hone that. But yeah, so I think it was a good balance of interested from afar, and then slowly kind of, every single night coming home from work and diving in.
Yeah, so after DoorDash, you head over to Jump Crypto. What was the draw to go there at that point, and what was your role when you were at Jump?
Yeah, actually before that I had a brief stint within the Polkadot ecosystem. There was always a natural draw for me to say interoperability is going to be a big problem within blockchains, right? We have Ethereum, we have Solana, we now have, we have infinite chains, it feels like now. There's new ones every day. And so being able to be the system, or help build the system that is going to connect all of that, be that infrastructure, I felt was what I wanted to get involved, kind of that picks and shovels play. At the time, Polkadot was it.
Yeah.
Polkadot was hey, we saw Ethereum. Gavin Wood obviously helped build Ethereum, the virtual machine. This isn't going to scale. We're going to build Polkadot. And in many ways, they were kind of ahead of the game. The tech was great. But I saw a lot of what Jump Crypto was doing. I thought they were leaders in the space and joined them. And obviously, Wormhole was a main focus for us when we were there. And eventually, we had to spin it out. We had to decentralize. So we created the Wormhole Labs and Wormhole Foundation. And today, Wormhole's contributed to by 4 core contributors across about 100 people.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when asking people if they believed in a multi-chain thesis was still kind of a spicy question.
Oh yeah. I actually just gave a talk today at the conference, and I show a chart of blockchain growth, number of blockchains launched up and to the right. But I was when we started Wormhole, it was not a consensus bet. It was kind of a hot take that you believed multi-chain was going to be it.
Mm-hmm. And so when did Jump Crypto start Wormhole? Was it 2021-ish after DeFi summer?
Yeah, no. So originally the way it started was connecting Ethereum and Solana. That was the whole goal. So how do we send assets from Ethereum to Solana? Fun fact, Wormhole was actually the co-host of the first Solana hackathon ever.
Awesome.
And it was started with by 3 engineers, Wormhole in particular. Jump got involved, and then the team at Jump Crypto in particular, myself and some others, were focused purely on, okay, we've connected Ethereum and Solana, how do we expand this further? So that was just Asset Bridge at the time. Then we launched messaging, and now we're connected to 95% of on-chain activity. So it quickly scaled from there.
Yeah, so Jump Crypto is a formal entity, US based?
US based, yes, yes. Go ahead.
No, and so then you're building Wormhole and you realize that it's probably not the best idea to be a CEO headed entity building a decentralized infrastructure. So was that kind of like playing into the consideration to creating Foundation and Labs?
I think, yes. I'll answer a short question, but I don't think it was the predominant thing. I think with something like Wormhole, it almost, I know a lot of people use analogies in this space, but it very much so is like this like baseline infrastructure that helps everything work, right? Like users send assets from all these chains, apps send messages to coordinate across Solana, Arbitrum, Base, Sui, etc. It coordinates all this stuff in the background. Mm-hmm. It's very much so this like, if you think about living your day-to-day life, all the things you don't think about, the highways you're on, the plumbing you use, those types of things. So it becomes almost like this public good in a way, and a public good can't be run by a central entity, right? You have to have this kind of like decentralization effect where the foundation, obviously, goal is to launch this DAO. It would be DAO governed. You need labs to kind of contribute meaningful code. No different than a lot of other protocols today. I think the one difference we really made is having other contributors outside those two. Mm-hmm. So we've brought on one of the best security teams in the space called Asymmetric Research, X Labs, et cetera. So it was really more about like something like this can't be run by one entity. We need to expand out.
Yeah. So what's the overarching vision for Foundation then? And then do you guys kind of provide support to labs to like onboard devs and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, today they are entirely separate entities. First of all. The foundation's main goal, and a lot of people will say this, but I'm going to get behind the lingo, but to be a steward of the protocol, if you will. We want to grow Wormhole as much as possible. Something like Wormhole benefits a lot from network effects. The more developers using it, the more users using it, the better. And it also helps solve a lot of core problems like liquidity fragmentation, which we were just talking about earlier on stage, using your apps across all these different chains. So for us, we focus a lot on the growth. Focus a lot on research, a lot on security. Those are kind of the main things the foundation does. We don't do any of the core protocol work, so that's what the Wormhole Labs team does. In most instances, the Wormhole Labs team receives some sort of grant or something to work on a lot of that, but they'll do everything like expand to new chains, implement new features, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot to be said for companies, entities, projects that go through adversity.
Oh yeah.
And Wormhole faced like a pretty gnarly exploit in 2022, north of $200 million that were lost. And then Jump Crypto kind of like came in and helped save a little bit of the day to remove some of the burden on end users that might have suffered that loss. So here we are, it's 2024, like clearly Wormhole has survived, there's a foundation, there's a labs. What were sort of like the main lessons learned, and like how has Jump Crypto as like an entity been able to benefit from stepping in and providing a stop loss to end users in the Wormhole ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying, when obviously it's not the best question to get, especially when it recently happened, but I actually really enjoy this question now. I think there's something to be said about being battle tested.
100%.
I think there's something to be said about how a team and a protocol shows up when facing adversity. Mm-hmm. And candidly, we look back, obviously the incident we're not proud of, but how we handled it, we're very proud of. And we feel stronger for it. We feel like we do have the best security, of all the interoperability protocols because of that incident, right? And I'm not going to go too in depth on it, but like we hired the CISO from Mozilla Firefox. We have most teams in this industry get external audits, right? They say, hey, will you audit this for X, Y, and Z amount of money? We have a team effectively that's internal. So security is so important. We have a team that's effectively internal, focused on the security of Wormhole. And last thing I'll say is like, people often ask me like, how do you solve security? There's no silver bullet. We actually take a lot of the boring stuff we do in Web 2, bring it to Web 3, which is the one I like to talk about the most is defense in depth. Right, so a lot of people will just get an audit, or builders will just get an audit, and they'll be like, "We're ready to go," but really, like, it's still pretty vulnerable. What you want is like multiple layers of defense, right? You can use a lot of analogies here. One I oftentimes use is like, if you watch Harry Potter, Voldemort, you have to kill like 6 Horcruxes yes. to ultimately get at a vulnerability. That's the way to think about wormholes. You have to get past these layers to ultimately get at a vulnerability again. So, look, we were in a privileged position to have, be able to refund users effectively the day, very, very shortly after. And today, Jump is an entirely separate entity. They're an investor. No one at Jump currently works on Wormhole Foundation, Wormhole Labs, but we're grateful for obviously them being involved back then and helping users.
Yeah, I think another great analogy would maybe be like ships compartmentalizing. So if there's water that starts flooding into a ship, that they can still shut off the doors and like stop the flooding from happening.
I'm going to use that. It's actually really good. I totally know what you mean. Yeah, like the whole ship doesn't flood. It's just like this chamber.
So I'm like thankful that you went into that, because it's super interesting that you onboarded a new CISO from like Web 2, and now you have these internal processes where you continuously audit yourselves internally. And so I was kind of going to lean into that and say, how does that kind of like double down as you add these new networks? Like, is it super beneficial to have a CISO who's internally reviewing SUI or EVM chains or Cosmos chains that you onboard versus having to like hire out like Secure or any other auditing firm?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will say is we do an internal review of every net new thing we write, every new code we write. We also will do an external as well. So we still do both.
Got it.
As again, maybe like defense in depth there as well. But it's super beneficial. And I think our goal with Wormhole is actually for it to be permissionless. The DAO will soon be live. You'll soon be able to, anyone can make a proposal of like, hey, connect to this chain. And then it's almost like Uniswap. Like here is, for Wormhole, here's the team that's going to deploy the endpoints. Here's the relayer. Here's the team that's going to deploy the asset bridge. And you can make it so that Wormhole is permissionless. But today, one of the things, the big blockers, is new virtual machines are really hard. You know, we have EVM, we have SVM, we have Move. Wormhole is actually connected to the most out of any other interop protocol, right? So I think we're connected to 5 different ones today. Reason being is new virtual machines can actually introduce, you have to rewrite contracts. Whenever you rewrite contracts, your chances of vulnerability goes up, right? So I think we'll have this really great permissionless model, especially with the virtual machines we support today. One thing we'll kind of like see how it plays out is how we add new virtual machines in the future. But that head of security and that security team will play a pivotal role in making sure that if we do support a new VM like Ton, which is quite hot, we'll do it properly.
So what is like the process then for choosing which network to start providing interoperability between? Maybe like SUI was relatively new and you connected to them because they did or they didn't have the users. Are you looking at the developer communities behind the chains? Are you looking at the on-chain transactions? Are you looking at the liquidity? Is it a combination of all things? Is each chain or each new network, is it going to be a different kind of in-depth review for something new that they bring to the table?
Absolutely. So to give you context on how its system works today, so the Guardians, branded term for validators, I don't want to confuse people. Wormhole's security model functions on what's called proof of authority. So you have these highly reputable validators that are securing every message, every piece of data that goes through Wormhole. You have your Chorus One, your Figment, P2P, like very, very reputable validators. You need 13 out of 19 to come to consensus on every message. You also need 13 out of 19 to vote yes on adding a new chain. So anyone can technically propose. A lot of times Wormhole contributors will propose, and when they do propose, it's usually based on data like developers, it's based on activity, it's based on maybe how much they need assets that were like bridges built on Wormhole can bring in, right? So there's a lot of different factors, but I think the important thing is that anyone can propose, the Guardians vote, and actually, I don't want to give timelines, that's like always a product no-no, but like, you know, give her a couple months, give or take, Wormhole DAO will be live, and anyone can probably put a proposal up to say, hey, we should connect to this chain and go through the process.
Yeah, I love the fact that Wormhole is going to be decentralizing into a DAO. I think we can go back to all presidential elections and see that only a small percentage of the people actually vote, but then afterwards, a large percentage of people are very vocal about their dislikes for who got selected. So how are you guys going to kind of address the governance issue with like lazy voters? Maybe only 10% of the people are actually going to participate in governance, but then you're going to deal with the backlash of like a loud majority. Are there ways to incentivize people to continue participating in DAO governance?
Yeah, so I can't say too much here because we haven't released what we're planning on doing, and I think what we're going to release is really going to help. But the things I can say is Guardians, as those that are securing it, should have some more of a say, right? So there could be some weighting there. And then we currently today do a stake for governance model. So we worked with Tally, which is a leading governance provider in the Ethereum ecosystem. it's scope lift, and we're actually building out a lot of net new stuff for governance in the Solana ecosystem. You'll be able to vote, we call it multi-gov, TM. You'll be able to vote from any chain your token's on. We're seeing all these tokens go all these chains. What happens, you go to these different chains, you can't vote with them.
Right.
And so whatever chain you're on, with multi-gov, you'll be able to vote on your DAO. So that there solves one problem, which is like, hey, if I go use my token DeFi on this chain, how am I going to vote on the home chain?
Correct.
Right. So like we're thinking about participation. Multi-gov is a way to help get participation. Right. So that's one thing. Having the guardians, like the more active participants, being involved, and then stake for governance. Right. Like there likely will be some sort of incentives for doing this. However, the thing we're working on is like you need to make sure the incentives are right. You don't want perverse incentives, and that's like easier said than done, frankly. And so we're learning from a lot of stuff in the past, and we think we're going to roll out a really compelling model in a couple months.
That sounds interesting. So I guess maybe 4 or 5 years ago, saying, do you believe in a multi-chain future would have kind of been like a spicy question. Today, do you believe in a multi-bridge future?
Look, yes. I'll say my maybe first principle thesis on this would be this industry should not allow, and this goes against everything we've built with Wormhole and what I would want, but like this industry should not let one winner take all, right? Because what that means is like everything is riding on one thing. Mm-hmm. And I think as like from a first principles, the industry should have some sort of decentralization in that fact. Do I think it will consolidate to a few? Absolutely, because we have to think about what a lot of bridges do. Mm-hmm. A lot of bridges cause a lot of liquidity fragmentation, aka multiple versions of many of the same asset.
Yes.
So users, that sucks, if you're a user. Developers, if I have a DEX, which one am I going to prioritize to build liquidity in? Oh, the borrow lend though is supporting this one. They need to use me for liquidations, but we have a different asset, right? So liquidity fragmentation is horrible if you have a ton. The developer UX of like what they're using gets more difficult, right? You have to learn how to use multiple. So I think for those reasons, it benefits to have this consolidation. I think it's a question of how much we'll consolidate and like what it looks like. I think we're starting to see this interesting trend around token standards or frameworks. So, Wormhole has native token transfers where you're effectively able to, the developer can issue an asset, any stablecoin. We just announced with Agora AUSD on stage, and they can control those contracts, but they can put multiple messaging providers for the actual verification between the contracts.
Cool.
So Burn and Mint, you can use Wormhole verification, seller verification, whatever you want. And what that does is that you only have 2 sets of contracts as opposed to 10. 10 is what causes liquidity fragmentation, right? So, I believe in a multi-bridge feature. I definitely think it'll be consolidated. I think this will be one of the few spaces on-chain that gets consolidated, but I think we should be careful on letting one win.
Sure. And so for Wormhole to kind of like build out this vision, are you guys providing like an SDK or some sort of toolkit for developers to be able to build on any of the associated chains and then also be able to interop between other chains?
Yes, you're making it easy for you. So quickly, how do you think about Wormhole? People say Wormhole's a bridge. It's not. Wormhole is what we call an interoperability protocol. What that means is effectively we give you the ability to send data between Ethereum and Solana, name your blockchain, insert it there, right? Think of mental model here is Swift. If you've ever sent a wire, you're likely sending from one bank that is different from another bank, different database systems, how they work. Swift is the unifying language. That is Wormhole. Once you have that core primitive, you can build stuff on top. Mm-hmm. So bridges are very popular, token bridges, intense bridges. You can build oracles. You can build all types of things cross-chain. So what Wormhole is a platform, and we have like 9 tools that gives builders the ability to build bridges, build oracles, build whatever they need cross-chain. I think a lot about Stripe too, just to use another analogy. People say, Stripe does payments. What does that mean? Stripe literally supplies you with out-of-the-box payment tools to make, if I want to sell a shirt online, they handle payments. The checkout widget, the on and off ramps, the settlement, they do everything, right? And so we do that for multi-chain.
I love that. So kind of like zooming out and wrapping up, you're a US-based builder. We have a lot of like regulatory ambiguity with legislators and regulators here in the States as towards the future of crypto. Does this impact your ability to build here, or maybe some of your international peers who are also working on Wormhole? Does it kind of like change the way in which they want to focus on different regions of the world in which they're delivering these tools to?
Yeah. So first thing is, I'm actually not. I'm American. I'm a citizen, but I'm not U.S. based.
Oh, okay.
So I'm actually based in Lisbon, Portugal.
Smart move.
But yeah, it's great. And I think predominantly most of Wormhole contributors are based outside the US today. And it's absolutely something we consider, right? I think all of us want some sort of regulation, right? We want clarity. We just want to make sure it doesn't stifle innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we do have to make decisions around what the US is doing. For instance, hiring in Europe, hiring South America, and it does dictate our day-to-day in terms of how we go about that, right? We're not hiring talent in the US because we really can't. So all the leadership within the Wormhole Foundation is out of the US. One of our core contributing entities is entirely in South America. So yeah, I mean, we plan around it for sure.
Sure. I mean, it's the state of affairs and kind of where our legislators have put us right now. So kind of like last question, zooming out, we're Permissionless 3. I guess we're almost at the end of day one.
Yeah.
You yourself have already given a main stage talk, or at least a keynote. What's like a kind of walkaway or takeaway that you have from this event that has stood out to you compared to other maybe conferences you've been to this year?
Yeah. I think actually other conferences I've been to, like carries on this theme. I think we say institutions are coming, institutions are coming, institutions
Since
are coming.
2017.
Exactly. But I actually kind of will compare that a little bit to like AI, for instance. Like we've actually been saying AI is coming since 2015. Maybe people would argue earlier, like arguably for a while. The thing is like these things happen, and I think a lot of us expect it to be overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like institutions, an ETF happened, institutions are here, inflow of capital, yay, right? But the thing is like it happens slowly, especially on institutions, right? And so for it to be 2017 and now in 2024, us to start seeing actually institutions coming, right? I was at Breakpoint and I saw on stage Citi, SocGen. We did an announcement with Securitize and the assets they work with fund managers, which is KKR, Hamilton Lane, BlackRock. Like now it actually is happening.
Yeah.
As a builder, I'm actually seeing it. And so one theme is like kind of the actualization of the institutions are coming. We're seeing some of that here, I think, with some of the talks. And the other theme I would say is we've done a really good job as an industry of like scaling, right? A lot of these blockchains came from like, oh my God, how do we get more throughput, cheaper gas fees, all this stuff, right? If we want all these people to be on chain, we need all this capacity. The thing is that created other problems. And so solving things like liquidity fragmentation is extremely important, and like starting to see a lot of more people care about that. New stablecoin issuers like Agora and AUSD care about that. So that's another theme we've been seeing that I think is really interesting.
Awesome. Who do you want to talk to, and how can they reach out to you?
I would talk to everyone. If you're building anything on chain, why aren't you doing it on multiple? That'd be my first question. More liquidity, more users. And if you're issuing assets, come talk to us. We've been doing this for many, many years and can help you out.
Awesome. Thanks, Robinson.
Thank you.
If you want to see any more of the interviews we've had here at Permissionless, head over to Neo News Today's YouTube channel to catch the other video recordings.